You ever wake up to find someone's crossed a line? Not with words, but with bulldozers. This is the story of Jack Ransom, a retired Army engineer. A quiet man with a big heart, and how his peaceful life got bulldozed by the most vicious HOA in the county. But this isn't a sob story. This is a war story. Because when they knocked down Jack's barn, he didn't just fight back. He drained their lake. Cut to Jack on his porch, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise, a normal morning before everything went sideways. Jack had served 30 years in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, built bridges under gunfire, cleared minefields in Kandahar. But now, all he wanted was peace, and his 15-acre slice of heaven on the edge of Willow Creek Estates. He wasn't technically in the HOA's neighborhood. His property line butted up against theirs, but he'd never signed a covenant, never paid dues. Still, he was close enough for them to see his red barn, and apparently that was the problem. Narrator: to Jack. It was a barn. To Cheryl Billings. It was an unauthorized structure, violating community aesthetics. And Cheryl, she was the president of the Willow Creek HOA. Think, a suburban dictator in yoga pants and pearls. Cheryl didn't ask questions. She issued demands. She first sent a letter, signed with flair, but no legal standing. Then came the citations. Then the warnings. But Jack ignored them. Why wouldn't he? He wasn't under their rule. That didn't sit well with Cheryl. Cut to a scene of Cheryl speaking at an HOA meeting. Passive-aggressive smile. Talking about property values and community standards. Narrator: Cheryl made it personal. She rallied her board, whispered to zoning friends, dug into dusty building codes, and somehow, despite Jack owning the land fair and square, she got a county judge to issue a removal order on his barn. Jack fought it, hired a lawyer, brought out land deeds older than Cheryl's Botox subscription. But Cheryl had connections, and she knew how to push paper faster than Jack could swing a hammer. Then, one day, Jack left for a VA appointment. When he came home, his barn, the barn he'd built with his own hands, the one with his late wife's name carved into the frame, was gone. Leveled, destroyed. No phone call. No knock. Just tire tracks. And silence. Cut to Jack standing at the wreckage. No emotion on his face. Just slow breathing. Controlled. Too controlled. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just looked, and then he turned around and walked to the shed. Not the tool shed. The old one, where he kept the army maps, the engineering books, the ground flow diagrams of his land. Narrator: voice sharpening. Because here's what Cheryl didn't know. Jack's property sat on a natural slope, and decades ago, it had been the main water source for the very lake. Willow Creek HOA was built around a lake they used for HOA events, weddings, fishing, 4th of July fireworks, and the water that fed that lake. It passed through a private trench system, originally dug by a rancher named Eli Garver in the late 1800s. It ran right under Jack's land. And Jack, he still had access, so when Cheryl bulldozed his barn without permission, without compensation, and without remorse, Jack did what any logical man would do. He started digging. Narrator: smirking. They destroyed his legacy. Now he was going to drain theirs. But first, he needed confirmation, proof, something the HOA couldn't argue with in court, in public, or in the press, and he knew exactly where to get it. The county records office, a dusty file room where forgotten clauses sleep, and occasionally, wake up angry. Final shot: Jack stepping into the records building. Camera zooms in as he opens a drawer marked W, water rights. Narrator: quiet and ominous. This wasn't over. It had just begun. Others, with old paper and patience. Jack wasn't just looking for revenge, he wanted justice with precision. And somewhere in these records was the weapon he needed. Cut to a yellowed parchment marked Water Rights, Parcel G, Garver Family, 1892. Jack's eyes narrow. It was all there. Handwritten in cursive so fine it looked like art. A clause buried in the original land deed. All water rights and trench control shall remain with the landholder of Parcel G, with full discretion of flow. Translation: Jack controlled the water trench, and that trench still fed Lake Harmony, the pride of the HOA. Narrator: they destroyed his barn. He could now legally dry out their lake. Jack scanned the page, took copies, even snapped photos for backup. He wasn't leaving anything to chance. Then, as he turned to leave, a voice called out behind him, "Looking for trouble, or just found it?" Jack turned. A woman stood there, early 60s, sharp eyes, city badge on her WINDBREAKER. Her name was Darla Cooper, retired municipal engineer and former Willow Creek resident. She'd been watching Jack since he walked in, and she had a story of her own. Cut to a diner booth. Darla and Jack sip black coffee. A quiet alliance forms. Narrator building intrigue. Darla once lived lakeside before Cheryl Billings fined her $250 a day over unapproved ornamental flamingos. Eventually Darla was forced to sell her house, and Cheryl, she flipped it to her niece at a discount. That wasn't petty, that was predatory. Darla still had footage, records, even aerial drone video of the bulldozers trespassing onto Jack's land a full 24 hours before the court order was active. Jack leaned in. His fingers drummed on the table like a countdown. They had evidence, they had motive. Now they just needed a plan. Cut to Jack's property, nightfall. He walks with a lantern and a rolled-up blueprint under his arm. Jack knew every inch of his land. Every route, every slope, every forgotten irrigation ditch. The trench system, long overgrown, still connected to a flood channel behind the lake. If he diverted the water now, not only could he cut off Lake Harmony's inflow, he could reverse it. Narrator.com, but chilling, he wouldn't sabotage. He'd reclaim. A legal redirection. Using the clause they forgot even existed, Jack went to work. Quiet, methodical, no noise, no drama, just a shovel, an old army backhoe, and a rancher's resolve. Cut to HOA grounds. Children paddle in the lake. Sprinklers mist over golf greens. Everything looks serene for now. Then, the first signs. The lake dropped a few inches. Barely noticeable, but enough for one angry Karen to post on the neighborhood forum. Why does the water line look weird? Then came more posts. Algae bloom. Did the water authority shut us off? Someone even blamed beavers. But Cheryl, she wasn't buying excuses. Cut to Cheryl slamming her tablet down at the HOA clubhouse. She stormed out in heels and fury, phone in hand, demanding answers from the county. But the county water office told her what Jack already knew. Lake Harmony was not a county-maintained lake, it was privately sustained. And its trench, privately controlled by Jack. Narrator, grimly amused. The HOA had built their kingdom on a lake, fed by a man they just declared war on, as Cheryl scrambled for answers. Jack continued reinforcing the trench diversion. He worked through the night, fortified with concrete mix and steel bars. By morning, water gushed downhill toward an old creek bed, miles from Lake Harmony. Cut to HOA residents, peering over docks now resting on mud. The panic hit like a thunderclap. Weddings had to be postponed. The HOA's annual Lake Fest canceled. Paddle boats were stuck. Fish flopped. Mosquitoes swarmed. Narrator, and all the while, Jack said nothing. He didn't smile, didn't post, didn't brag. He just built, because he knew the next phase was coming. Legal retaliation, and Cheryl. She was already drafting it. That afternoon, Jack got served a court summons. Emergency injunction hearing. They were accusing him of environmental tampering, malicious interference, and hostile land activity, but Jack didn't flinch. He read every page, then calmly picked up a folder from his desk, labeled, Easement Law, Confirmed. And as he flipped the final page, he spotted something even he hadn't noticed before. A second clause, buried beneath the water rights section. A clause that didn't just give him trench control, it made the HOA liable for any damage caused by unauthorized entry, including the barn. Narrator, voice tightening. They came after him with bulldozers. He was walking into court with a nuclear bomb. Final shot. Jack tightening his belt, heading toward his truck as thunder rumbles in the background. Narrator calm, ominous. He didn't start the war, but he was about to finish it. Jack Ransom wasn't the type to dress things up. He walked into that courthouse like it was just another job site. One mission, one goal. Expose the truth and hold the Willow Creek HOA accountable for the wreckage they left behind. Inside, courtroom, buzzing with low murmurs. Cheryl sits at the plaintiff's table in a pastel power suit, flipping through glossy exhibits. She had her lawyer, a fast-talking, overconfident type with gelled hair and a Bluetooth in one ear. He came prepared with photos of the drained lake, HOA testimonies, and a media spin machine ready to paint Jack as a rogue threat to community harmony. But Jack, he came with evidence. And Darla Cooper, narrator, they weren't just fighting this case, they were fighting every overreach, every fine, every fence Cheryl had forced down in the name of aesthetics. Cut to the judge entering. Gavel slams. Silence. Cheryl's lawyer opens with drama. Lawyer, Your Honor. We're dealing with a disgruntled landowner who's maliciously diverted water from a public lake, harming property values, wildlife, and the well-being of our community. Jack's expression doesn't change. He waits. Then the lawyer pulls out a surprise. A new witness. A supposed environmental officer who claims Jack's trench diversion violated wetlands protocols. Narrator with tension. That's when Jack knew. Cheryl wasn't just playing dirty. She was faking the rulebook. Jack rose from his seat, calmly handed a folder to the bailiff. Inside. Official trench rights signed by the Garver family in 1892. A topographic map showing the lake's dependency. On his trench. And a notarized affidavit from the county's real environmental officer stating Jack's actions were legal, documented, and preserved under historical easement law. Cut to the judge flipping through the documents. Cheryl's expression tightens. Narrator. Jack didn't just refute their claim, he dismantled their entire foundation. Then came Darla. She took the stand with poise. She spoke of Cheryl's pattern of intimidation, including her own home being seized under bogus HOA violations. She showed drone footage of the bulldozers entering Jack's land one day early, proving illegal trespass. Narrator. And just like that, the tables turned. The judge leaned forward, visibly displeased. Judge firm. Mrs. Billings, why did your contractors enter Mr. Ransom's land before the enforcement date? Cheryl stammered, tried to pivot, blamed contractor miscommunication. But Jack wasn't done. He reached into his folder and pulled out the second clause. Narrator, low and deliberate. The one Cheryl never saw coming. This clause made any party who damaged structures or land tied to the water system financially liable for restoration or loss. That included Jack's barn. Cut to Cheryl's lawyer blinking in confusion. Whispers echo through the courtroom. Jack handed over photos of the destroyed barn, building estimates, and proof that it had been legally constructed before any of Cheryl's complaints. Then, the final blow, a printed email from Cheryl herself, arrogantly mocking Jack's barn, sent to another HOA board member, weeks before the court order. She wrote, "That old shack's going down, one way or another." Narrator smirking, intent to destroy. In writing, game set, lawsuit. The judge called a recess. Cheryl huddled with her lawyer, who looked like he just read his own obituary. When court resumed, the judge's tone was ice. Judge, Mr. Ransom, you are within your rights to control your easement. The HOA has clearly overstepped legal boundaries. As for damages, you may pursue civil action. Cheryl stood, shouting, "This man ruined our lake." Jack turned to her calmly, firmly. Jack, you ruined your lake the moment you thought you could bulldoze my land without consequences. The gavel dropped. Hearing adjourned. Cut to outside the courthouse. Press waiting. Cheryl storms past the cameras. Jack walks past silently, nodding to Darla. Narrator. But this wasn't the end, because Cheryl, she made one last mistake. One even Jack didn't see coming. As he got into his truck, a black SUV pulled up beside him. A stern-looking man in a federal windbreaker stepped out. "Mr. Ransom." Jack nodded. "We're investigating the Willow Creek HOA for federal fraud, racketeering, and misuse of funds. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Jack blinked. Then smirked. Narrator rising. Jack wanted justice. What he got was a front row seat to Cheryl's total collapse. And next time, the lake won't be the only thing drained. Final shot. Cheryl watching out her window as the federal SUV drives into the neighborhood. Cheryl Billings built her HOA empire on intimidation, fines, and fake charm. She controlled lawns, mailboxes, fence heights, and thought she could bulldoze her way through anything. But what Cheryl didn't know, her real violations weren't about paint colors. They were federal. And Jack Ransom had just lit the fuse. Cut to federal agents speaking with Jack on his front porch. Clipboards out. Jack's demeanor, calm as ever. They'd received a tip from someone inside the HOA. An anonymous whistleblower, who claimed Cheryl had been funneling HOA funds into shell companies disguised as contractor payments. But the contractors didn't exist, or worse. They were her relatives, narrator, for years. Cheryl's game was airtight. She'd find residents until they broke. Then she'd buy their homes at a discount, using HOA-funded hush money. Jack handed over everything he had, emails, court documents, and Darla's drone footage. But then he dropped the real bomb. A USB drive slipped to him by a former HOA board member who moved away in fear. On it, accounting records, secret emails, and a private message from Cheryl herself that read, "Just make it look legit. HOA doesn't audit anything anyway." Narrator with rising tension. Turns out, Cheryl had been right. Until Jack showed up. Cut to Cheryl inside her home, pacing, her phone clutched white-knuckled. She had no idea the investigation had begun, but she could feel something was off. The board had stopped replying. The local zoning officer, her old golf buddy, wasn't returning calls. Then came the knock. 2 agents. Badges out, questions ready. "We need to talk about community funds, Mrs. Billings." Her face went white. She tried to laugh, offered lemonade. They didn't drink it. Cut to Darla meeting Jack at a quiet trail near the diverted trench. The lake, now weeks into its drain, has turned into a shallow pond. "Darla, you think she's cracking?" "Jack, she cracked the moment she picked the wrong landowner." Together, they reviewed the HOA's public reports, and the gaps were massive. Tens of thousands of dollars labeled as miscellaneous landscaping, even payments, 2 consultants who had no license. Worse, a line item marked emergency demolition services for Jack's barn. 3 weeks before the court order was signed. Narrator. That was the smoking gun. Proof that Cheryl never had legal clearance. Just blind ambition. The agents called Jack. Again, that's time they had news. Narrator quiet but sharp. They traced the contractor's payment for the barn demolition straight into a bank account in Cheryl's husband's name. Only problem, her husband passed away 4 years ago. Fraud. Forgery. And likely money laundering. Cut to HOA clubhouse. Now empty. Cheryl sits alone at the head table, staring at a stack of complaints she can't silence anymore. Whispers were spreading through Willow Creek. Homes around the lake were losing value. The local news picked up the story. Lake drained in legal feud, HOA, under federal scrutiny. Residents were furious. Meetings turned chaotic. People demanded answers. Refunds, resignations. One brave homeowner stood and said what everyone was thinking. She went after a veteran. And she's bringing us all down with her. Cut to Cheryl slamming the clubhouse door shut. She was losing control fast. Meanwhile, Jack kept working. He was restoring the trench, not to punish, not anymore, but to preserve what was his. He repaired old irrigation channels, planted native grasses, brought in a conservation expert to advise on proper drainage. He wasn't draining the lake out of spite anymore. He was reclaiming his land's purpose. Narrator: Cheryl took what he built with love, so Jack was going to turn what she built into a cautionary tale. Then came the final twist. Jack received a certified letter, not from Cheryl, from a class action law firm representing multiple HOA residents. Turns out, once Cheryl drained the HOA's finances, Jack wasn't the only one hurt. Lawsuits were coming, not just civil. Criminal, and she'd just hired a criminal defense attorney. Final shot. Cheryl watching her mailbox as neighbors walk by without saying a word. Her kingdom, quiet, empty, isolated. Narrator: calm/cold. You can only rule by fear for so long. Eventually, people stop following. Jack Ransom had drained the lake, exposed the corruption, and sent the HOA queen spiraling into a federal freefall. But now, victory came with echoes. And not all of them were satisfying, because while Cheryl was finally cracking, Willow Creek was collapsing too, and Jack was about to be offered a deal that no one expected. Cut to Cheryl's house. Curtains drawn, her luxury SUV gone. A real estate sign leans against the porch. The news was out. Federal investigators had frozen HOA accounts. Cheryl's assets were under review. Residents were furious. And with no HOA funds, the neighborhood's bills weren't getting paid. Trash pickup canceled. Security gate offline. The once pristine Lake Harmony community was rotting from the inside out, and in the middle of it all, they turned to Jack. Cut to a group of residents, some angry, some pleading, waiting outside Jack's gate. Narrator: they'd mocked his barn, filed complaints. Some even signed the demolition petition Cheryl passed around. But now, they were asking for help. Homeowner 1, you've got the trench rights. You're the only one who can fix the lake. Homeowner 2, if you agree to work with us, we can rebuild better. Without Cheryl, Jack stared at them, hands in his pockets. He didn't say yes, didn't say no. He simply said, let me think. Cut to Jack inside his barn's remains, now partially rebuilt. Tools line the wall. Darla joins him. Darla, you thinking of helping them? Jack, I'm thinking of helping the land. Darla watched him closely. Darla, you're a better man than I am. Jack half smiled, but he knew she was right. Cut to HOA emergency meeting. Cheryl absent. Residents arguing. One man stood up. Mid-50s, former banker, firm voice. We need a new HOA president. Someone fair. Someone with a spine. Whispers in the room. Then a name floated out. What about Jack? Narrator amused. Jack Ransom, president of the very HOA that tore down his barn. It sounded like a joke. Until it wasn't. Cut to Jack reading the nomination letter, left anonymously at his gate. He tossed it into the burn barrel. Watched the flames rise. Because Jack hadn't fought to become part of their world. He fought to defend his own. Still, something bothered him. Cut to Jack watching two kids skipping rocks into the dried-out lake bed. The lake wasn't just about Cheryl. It wasn't just about property lines. It was about memories community. The kind of peace his late wife had always wanted when they moved here, and now, it looked like a war zone. Narrator somber. He could let it die. Let the HOA collapse and the community turn to mud and silence. Or, he could do something unthinkable. Help them. Cut to Jack walking back into the county office. A younger clerk looks up. Jack, I want to file a temporary use agreement with the residents of Willow Creek. The clerk blinks. Surprised, Jack laid it out. He'd allow water flow again gradually under 3 conditions. Cheryl resigns and is never reinstated. Full HOA audits published online. With independent oversight, the barn must be rebuilt, at HOA expense, and maintained as a community center dedicated to veterans. The clerk stamped it. Done. Cut to Willow Creek. Construction begins. Jack operates the backhoe, steering water back toward the lake. Kids cheer. Elders clap. Darla smiles. Narrator, Jack, didn't forgive what they did, but he gave them something better than revenge. A chance to rebuild what they nearly destroyed. Not just the lake, but themselves. Then came the final twist. Cut to Cheryl in a cramped office. Her phone buzzes, unknown number. She answers. Voice on the line. This is Agent Linwood. We have additional charges pending wire fraud and falsified loan applications, tied to HOA dues. You may want to call your attorney again. Cheryl's face goes pale. Final scene. Jack standing near the newly rebuilt barn, now painted red and proudly flying a flag. A plaque near the door reads, in memory of Lila Ransom, for peace, not permission. Narrator gentle. Some men fight wars. Some build peace. Jack Ransom did both, with a shovel, a claws, and a whole lot of patience. But Cheryl's story, it's not over yet. Jack Ransom had done the impossible. He drained the lake, exposed corruption, rebuilt the community, but, as every engineer knows, every structure has its weak points, and Willow Creek's was about to crack. From the inside. Cut to the new HOA board meeting. The mood is cautious but hopeful. The residents voted in new leadership. Jack was offered the presidency, but he declined. Instead, he stayed on as a trusted advisor. But even with fresh faces, dark shadows lingered. Cut to Darla sifting through HOA financial records on her laptop, her brows knit tight. Narrator, Darla, had volunteered to audit the HOA's books to make sure Cheryl's mess didn't repeat. What she found wasn't just sloppy accounting, it was worse. Jack. Darla's voice cracked over the phone. There's $400,000 missing. Vanished from the reserve fund. Jack's jaw tightened. That was money meant for community repairs, lake maintenance. Emergencies, gone. Narrator, the missing money was a bombshell. But, even more explosive was what Darla uncovered next, a trail. A paper trail. Leading not outside the community, but inside it. Cut to Jack and Darla at the county records office again. This time, they pull up security camera footage from the HOA clubhouse. Narrator, they watched, frame by frame. And there, on a cold Tuesday night, was someone entering the clubhouse, after hours, someone wearing a familiar jacket. Someone who was part of the new board. Jack, who the hell is that? Darla paused the video. Darla, that's Mike Andrews. He's on the finance committee. Cut to a tense confrontation scene in the clubhouse. Jack and Darla face Mike, a middle-aged man with sweat on his brow. Narrator, Mike was a quiet man, a banker by trade, trusted by the community. Until now. Faced with the evidence, Mike faltered. He confessed to siphoning the money. claimed it was to cover debts from a failing small business, promised he'd pay it back, but the damage was done. Cut to angry residents at a community meeting. Voices raised, chairs scraping. Resident 1. How do we know the new board isn't just more of the same? Resident 2. We trusted them and they let us down. Narrator. The community was fracturing. Doubt replaced hope, and Cheryl's shadow grew longer. Cut to Cheryl, watching the chaos from her temporary apartment. She smirks. Narrator. Cheryl wasn't finished. She'd lost the battle, but the war, not yet. And she had a secret weapon. Cut back to Jack, standing by the lake, now full again, rippling gently in the wind. Narrator. Jack knew he had to act fast, because if the HOA couldn't get its act together, the whole community might fall apart. He started reaching out, not just to residents but to local officials, conservation groups, even veterans organizations. He wanted Willow Creek to be more than just a place with a lake. He wanted it to be a community worth fighting for. But then, the final blow. Cut to Jack opening an envelope. Inside, a deed, old, faded, stamped. Narrator with growing shock. A deed nobody knew existed. A deed that showed a secret parcel of land owned by Cheryl's family, right in the heart of Willow Creek. A parcel where Cheryl's niece was planning to build luxury condos. Without HOA approval, without permits. And that land, it bordered the main water source feeding Lake Harmony. Jack's eyes narrowed. Because this wasn't just greed, it was sabotage. Narrator intense. Cheryl was trying to squeeze out the community by starving the lake dry. And if she succeeded, the HOA would collapse entirely. Cut to Jack rallying Darla and a group of residents. Jack, we're not done. Not by a long shot. Final shot. The sun setting over Willow Creek, casting long shadows over the water. Narrator. The fight was far from over, and Jack was ready for whatever came next. Cheryl's niece, Vanessa Price, was a savvy developer. She saw opportunity in Willow Creek's chaos, a chance to build her own fortune on the backs of a struggling community, but she hadn't counted on Jack Ransom standing in her way. Cut to Vanessa in a sharp suit, surveying the construction site with an architect's blueprint in hand. She talks on her phone, voice low and sharp. Vanessa, make sure the permits look clean. HOA approval. Irrelevant. This is my family's land. Cut to Jack and Darla arriving at the site. Jack's expression is grim. Narrator. Jack had traced the secret deed to this very plot, and if Vanessa succeeded, the lake's water source would be cut off completely. He knew he had to act fast. Cut to Jack confronting Vanessa near the site fence. Jack, this land isn't just yours to build on. You're putting the entire community's future at risk. Vanessa smirking. Funny, I thought the community was already a sinking ship. Your little rebuild stunt delayed me, but I'm not stopping now. Narrator. Vanessa was confident, too confident. Cut to Jack and Darla back in the barn, reviewing documents. Suddenly, Darla's phone buzzes. Darla reading. Jack, you need to see this. She shows him a set of emails. Emails between Vanessa and Mike Andrews. Narrator: Mike, the man who stole $400,000, wasn't just a thief. He was Vanessa's inside man. Together, they'd planned to bankrupt the HOA, force residents to sell, and clear the way for Vanessa's condos. Jack felt the sting of betrayal. Not just from Mike, but from the community's blind trust. Cut to a packed town hall meeting. Voices raised, accusations flying. Resident 1. How could Mike do this? To us. Resident 2. We thought he was one of us. Narrator. The fracture in Willow Creek was deeper than Jack imagined. Trust was broken. Hope was fading. Cut to Jack sitting alone on a bench by the lake, staring at the water. He had one choice. Fight alone and risk losing everything, or unite the fractured community, even those who had doubted him. Cut to Jack standing before the crowd at an emergency meeting. Jack, this isn't just about me, it's about all of us. If we don't stand together, Vanessa wins, and the lake will be gone for good. The room fell silent, then slowly, hands started raising. Some hesitant, some determined, narrator hopeful. Jack's words ignited a spark, but the real test was still ahead. Cut to Jack and Darla organizing volunteers, repairing trenches, setting up surveillance, confronting construction crews. Meanwhile, Vanessa doubled down, hiring lawyers, pushing permits, and making backdoor deals. Cut to a secret late-night meeting. Vanessa and Mike exchange an envelope. Cash changes hands. Narrator. But just as Vanessa thought she had it all, a new player entered the game. Cut to a shadowy figure slipping a file under Jack's door. It was a whistleblower, a former HOA insider with a grudge against Cheryl and Vanessa. The file contained proof of forged documents used to claim ownership of the disputed land. Narrator dramatic, Vanessa's claim wasn't just greedy, it was fraudulent. Cut to Jack reviewing the documents, his jaw tightens. Jack, this changes everything. Final shot. Jack standing tall, backed by a united group of residents, facing down Vanessa's construction crew. Narrator, the battle for Willow Creek's future wasn't over, but now Jack had the upper hand. After months of war legal battles, betrayals, and broken trust, Jack Ransom stood ready to deliver the final blow. The fraudulent land claim by Vanessa Price was about to be exposed, and Cheryl Billings' reign of terror about to come crashing down for good. Cut to the courtroom doors swinging open. Vanessa strides in with her legal team, confident. Jack follows. Calm but resolute. Narrator, the evidence was clear. Forgeries, faked permits, illegal demolition, and now, a secret whistleblower's testimony that unraveled Vanessa's entire scheme. Cut to the whistleblower, a former HOA insider, giving a sworn statement. Whistleblower, I saw forged signatures, emails forged to cover up the illegal sale, and development plans. Vanessa was desperate to build her condos before anyone found out. Narrator, Vanessa's face paled. Her empire built on lies was crumbling. Cut to Jack's lawyer presenting the secret deed, clearly marking the disputed land as belonging to the community, not Vanessa's family. Narrator, the judge ruled swiftly. Vanessa's claim was dismissed. Construction was halted permanently, and the land was restored under community ownership. Cut to Cheryl now facing her own federal trial. Watching the news coverage, the camera lingers on her defeated expression. Narrator, Cheryl Billings faced charges fraud, racketeering, and abuse of power. Her HOA was dismantled, and Willow Creek was free. Cut to Jack standing on the dock of the now fully restored Lake Harmony, the water shimmering peacefully. The barn was rebuilt bigger and stronger. A community center and veterans memorial, Jack's wife's name carved into the plaque, a symbol of resilience. Cut to residents gathered for the barn's reopening, smiles, laughter, and a sense of renewed hope. Narrator, Jack didn't just fight for himself. He fought for every family, every neighbor, every memory tied to this land, and in the end, justice wasn't just served, it was built. Final shot. Jack raising a glass at the barn's reopening. The camera pulls back to show the peaceful lake. Kids playing, neighbors talking, narrator closing. Sometimes, it takes a single stand to change the course of history. Jack Ransom's stand saved more than a lake, he saved a community. Subscribe now for more true stories of courage, fight, and unexpected heroes. And remember, underestimate the power of one.